What's going on, everybody? Appreciate you tuning in. It is another busy weekend of hoops ahead of us, including the women's tournament, and we got all kinds of things to jump into about what's been happening over here in the Phoenix area. And for that, we bring in a guy that is kind of the top of the tier right now when it comes to this game, Mitch Northam, a good friend, a guy that I've known in the industry for a while now, women's sports writer for SB Nation, an AP voter, and also got co-host for the women's basketball podcast. Mitch, I appreciate it, man. It's a long time no see, but what a small world. We get a chance to talk a little hoops here.
Yeah, happy to be here. We're not talking Pocomoke or Worcester Prep, but it's fun to catch up.
Yeah, we've grown a little bit since then. With all due respect to my Warrior fans out there and everything else, man. On the road right now, you're getting ready to cover some Sweet 16 games and kind of you're over in Birmingham and a chance to see what's going to be a very fun game between Duke there and UNC, you'd think, huh?
Yeah. It's going to be probably an absolute rock fight, big defensive battle. Both of those teams are like top 10 defensive rating. But yeah, for the first time ever on the women's tournament, Duke and Carolina going back and forth, Sweet 16. So it should be a lot of fun. And then we got South Carolina, Texas, Notre Dame here. So pretty stacked regional out here in Birmingham.
I was about to say those are about as many heavy hitters as you could about name in women's basketball right there.
For sure.
We'll get into the tournament in a second. Let's jump into kind of the wild week that kind of was over there in Arizona. Changes, obviously, for ASU. They decide to make a move there with their women's head coach. And the obvious pick was Molly Miller right down the road at Grand Canyon with everything that she's been able to do there. But they had a little competition in trying to get her, but they are able to bring Molly Miller here to ASU. What do you think of that hire? I mean, obviously she had tremendous success for Grand Canyon, but jumping up a little bit in competition once you go to the Big 12.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, this was a season where there were a ton of Power Four openings. We had a couple in the SEC, a couple in the Big 12, just one in the Big 10 in Wisconsin, and none in the ACC. So it's kind of an interesting sort of coaching carousel cycle in that way. But Molly Miller was absolutely the number one sort of target for a lot of these programs that were sort of, searching for kind of the next big thing in terms of a head coach, looking for sort of a young up and coming head coach. She was mentioned a little bit last year as somebody who might have been in the mix for the Kentucky job. I think there were a lot of folks in, Big Blue Nation that maybe wanted her to get the gig. Kentucky instead, dropped the bag for Kenny Brooks to get him.
Worked out pretty well for him, to be honest. It's been okay.
Absolutely. Yeah. They were a top 4 seed this year in the NCAA tournament and, got to host first round games and all that. So, yeah, for these other openings that happen, Missouri opens up and Arkansas opens up. Those are really the first 2 big ones. And Molly Miller is at the top of the list for both of those schools. She grew up in Missouri, I think just about 2 hours from, Arkansas's campus in Fayetteville. So it made a lot of sense. I was told by some really good sources that Arkansas's AD, Hunter Yurachek, actually met with her before he even fired Mike Neighbors, Arkansas's former head coach. And that was before Arizona State had opened. So when Arizona State opens, I think that sort of changed the equation a bit. I think that Molly, I don't want to speak for her, but just sort of looking at the landscape here, it's easier to win in the Big 12 right now than it is the SEC. The SEC still has 6 teams playing in the Sweet 16 this weekend. Arkansas was not really, I think, willing to put the resources around her that's necessary to compete in the SEC in terms of NIL, rev share, all that stuff that's coming up. So, yeah, Arizona State is right down the road from where she was doing really well at Grand Canyon. If she doesn't want to, she probably doesn't have to move, save her on some relocation costs. And, so I think, once Arizona State opened, everybody kind of sensed, okay, they're going to be in the mix as well. I was told that their AD, went and met with her at their conference tournament that Grand Canyon had in Las Vegas, shortly after that job opened up. So, yeah, I mean, it made a lot of sense. Once Arizona State opened, they jumped through to the front of the line for Molly Miller.
Yeah, you had broken the news of Arkansas making that change. How close was that to her maybe considering that, or was that used as maybe a little bit of leverage to get more things that she wanted at a different job, or was that something you think she was actually really considering?
I think if Arizona State did not fire Natasha Adair, if Arizona State doesn't open, she probably takes the Arkansas job. But I think when Arizona State opens, I think that's just sort of changed the equation for them. I think, just Arizona State being in the Big 12, it's a league that, is pretty wide open in terms of women's basketball. TCU won the title this year for the first time ever. And all three of their really good seniors are going to graduate. So there's really not like a outstanding favorite in the Big 12 really going forward. That's a league you can probably piece some things together pretty quickly and turn some things around. Also, I mean, she's been in that area, in that state, for the past couple of years building at Grand Canyon. So she knows that area really well. And so to sort of dive headfirst into the SEC at a place like Arkansas that probably wasn't really willing to surround her with what was necessary. I think that changed the equation a little bit. It made Arizona State a more desirable place. But I do think if that job doesn't open, she probably goes and takes Arkansas. I think Arkansas thought that I think that's the only reason why they fired Mike Neighbors. I think they thought that they could get Molly Miller, but they didn't anticipate Arizona State making a move.
It was obviously a pretty tough run here for ASU. In this era right now, and we've seen teams, be able to reshape their rosters in a hurry and kind of make a push. What's a realistic kind of guideline or timeline on when you could see the Sun Devils competing for a Big 12 title? Is this something year one because of the portal and because she has shown the ability to recruit before that she can turn this into a competitive program next year?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a good chance that, like you mentioned with the portal, college basketball now is kind of a year-to-year proposition. I mean, you can go into the portal and find a starting five pretty quickly. There's a lot of really good basketball players in the portal right now. I think the question is going to be like, what sort of resources does Arizona State give her in terms of the NIL? At least just that for right now. Later on down the line, we get to the house settlement, rev share, all that. We'll see about that as well. But does she have the NIL to go shopping in the portal, so to speak? We've seen her, though, when she got to Grand Canyon, right away, they went 18-17, then a couple of 21 seasons there, and then 32-3 this year. So it's clear to me like she knows how to coach basketball, and she knows how to win, knows how to get good players in the win. It's just a question of, okay, do you have the NIL and all the other resources you need now to go in through the portal and be competitive? But I do think that people are going to want to play for her. I think that Arizona State can be an attractive place for players to come to. It seems like James Harden is pretty involved there in terms of giving money to the program and NIL and all that. So, if the women's basketball program gets a little bit of what football and men's basketball is getting, I think they can be competitive in the Big 12 pretty quickly. I think they can find themselves in the NCAA tournament pretty quickly.
In this era of portal, I mean, they've had 4 players already jump in, including Skylar Jones, which is probably the one that hurts the most there. Are we at the point where it's not even like something worth mentioning as a concern at the end of the year when you watch guys go like from your team into the portal, just because it's the norm now? I mean, like how do you gauge that? Is that any kind of concern that a new coach comes in and players are now starting to bail out, or is it that's literally where we are in college basketball?
I think it's pretty much the norm now. I think it's only really a red flag if you see like, the entire starting five leave, a program, or if you see like 12 players leave a roster or something. But even then, like that's just how it goes sometimes. I mean, the leading scorer in the country, Tanaya Latson from Florida State, is in the transfer portal right now. One of the teams here in the Sweet 16, Maryland, they brought in 9 transfers last year, and they just put this thing together on the fly, sort of built the plane as they were flying it, so to speak. I think that's just how women's basketball operates now. It really is sort of a year-to-year proposition, and we do sort of have a kind of free agency thing where you can build pretty quickly, but it can also fall apart pretty quickly. I do think continuity is an important thing, but like, one of the teams that I cover pretty closely, Duke in North Carolina, they were only one of 3 Power Four programs this season that didn't lose a transfer. And now they find themselves into the Sweet 16 too, but just like Maryland. So it's a little bit of, sort of running your own race and figuring out what fits your program. Are you going to comb the portal every year like a Coach Yo at Ole Miss, or are you going to get high school players and try to keep that continuity and really develop and only supplement with the portal like a Carol Lawson at Duke or a Courtney Banghart at UNC? But yeah, I mean, I think for sort of first-year head coaches, having the portal really speeds up the timeline of expectations. It's like, you should be able to go out and get these players in the portal that can help you win right away.
Speaking of first-year head coaches, GCU makes their replacement, Winston Gandy, a guy that had been in your neck of the woods for a little bit, but you look at his resume. I mean, it's about as impeccable as you can find for a guy getting a job like this. Had been at South Carolina, won a national championship there as an assistant. Before that, Carol Lawson over there at Duke, and obviously had been around some incredible coaches and had a lot of success. Taking over a program that's going to be, I don't want to say gutted is the wrong word, but their top 4 scorers are all seniors or grad students. Like it's going to look very different from where it was this year. What do you expect for him kind of getting his first real opportunity and kind of taking over a program like that?
Yeah, I think it's a great hire. Just to start, Winston Gandy is somebody who, was kind of climbing the coaching ranks for a while, started at Maryland under Brenda Freeze, coaches under Tina Langley at Rice. She's now at Washington, has a stint with the Wizards in between there, then goes to Duke with Carol Lawson and really helps her kind of build that program from the ground up. And now, these past 2 years with Dawn Staley, winning a championship last year, trying to do it again this year. He's widely respected in the coaching world. I was kind of surprised that, I thought there was a chance he might be in the mix for a head coaching job this year. I thought it would be kind of sort of somewhere in like the Mid-Atlantic or Northeast, sort of where he's from. But I think it's a great hire by Grand Canyon if you want to sort of keep this thing rolling and keep your school in its status as like a mid-major power where they're making the NCAA tournament every year, every other year, rolling off 21 seasons, the whole thing. Gandy is somebody who is respected as a recruiter, really helped Carol Lawson get some good players in the portal, helped Dawn Staley get some good players out of the portal. When you talk about like the Celeste Taylors of the world and Cheyenne Day Wilson and Tahina Pau, some of those players really came to those places, I think, because of Winston Gandy. He's a highly regarded sort of up and coming coach. I saw something where Grand Canyon's president, was maybe a little bit miffed that Molly Miller had been taking interviews with Power Four jobs and all this other stuff. And he was talking about how, he wanted somebody who wanted to stay here. And the best sign that Grand Canyon is successful and that Winston Gandy has success is that he starts interviewing for Power Four jobs and eventually moves on. That's a good thing for Grand Canyon. That means that Grand Canyon has won and is winning. So I think he's gonna, he'll probably have his work cut out for him a little bit. The transfer portal already opened this week, and so he's going to be a little bit behind, I think, in that respect because he's still with South Carolina. But I don't have any doubt in his ability to put together a competitive roster and win some games out there.
Yeah, I feel like if you are the president of GCU, your goal and aspiration should be like a Drake for a men's team, where you get a coach for 3-4 years, you are winning your conference, and you're trying to make a Sweet 16, trying to make a run in the tournament where you upset a couple teams, knowing at that point they're going to get their opportunity somewhere else, but you become that pit stop that everyone looks at as this is a respected mid-major. I was honestly a little, with as much success as Molly has had, I still kind of looked at it. They're so new to kind of getting to the Division I level and kind of doing this. Right. I didn't know if it had that kind of notoriety. And I thought this was a little bit of a surprising hire in that, I didn't know that they could potentially go out and get a name like this. Is GCU now at a point where their brand is kind of respected to the level where this kind of a hire is maybe not expected, but maybe not also a shock?
Yeah, I was a little bit surprised that they were able to go get a guy like Winston Gandy because, like I said, he has a reputation and has as a really good coach and has had his eyes on some jobs over the years and stuff, and was always at some point going to get a head coaching job. Yeah, I'm a little surprised it is at Grand Canyon, but yeah, I think that's a testament to what Molly built there over the past couple of years. And yeah, I think they really do have the chance to sort of become a mid-major power if they, if Winston works out there and if they get the next hire right. Yeah, that's your goal. I think at Grand Canyon is sort of to become that stepping stone for great coaches to the Power Four level. That means that you're winning and you're successful and winning your conference and making the NCAA tournament every couple of years and the whole thing. So yeah, that should be Grand Canyon's goal, to be sort of like VCU is in men's basketball, or like Florida Gulf Coast is, on the women's side, a consistent mid-major power that, teams are kind of scared of to play in March.
There's been a lot of talk nationally about the NCAA tournament on the men's side and kind of all the top seeds are advancing and kind of this idea that maybe NIL has kind of killed the Cinderella. It's a little worse on the women's side. I mean, all four ones are there, all 4 twos are there, all 4 threes are still there. And the lowest seed in the tournament right now is a 5 seed. Do you buy any stock in that? And then also kind of additionally, like, how much do you need to have a checkbook and an NIL to be able to compete right now at ASU or at GCU? Like, how much is it going to come down to? If you don't have the funds, you're not going to be able to compete at the highest level.
Yeah, I mean, in women's basketball, it's sort of always been this way. Like, we have had a 16 over a 1, but we've never had a 15 over a 2, and we've never had a 14 over a 3, I don't think. So like, those are like 2 big upsets that like we see every now and then in the men's tournament, and we haven't seen in the women's. And I think that's just simply because, there have been programs and universities who have chosen to invest in women's college basketball, and then there's some that haven't. And so, the ones that have are going to be, these power players. So your South Carolinas, your UConns, your Tennessees, your LSUs, North Carolina, Duke. The list goes on and on. I think that as sort of like the NIL thing evolves, and I think even more so once we get into the house settlement rev share stuff, I do think we are going to see a bigger disparity in kind of the haves and have-nots in the sport, because you're going to have, certain schools and stuff where, at a lot of the Power Fours, like football is going to be the first thing that gets the piece of the pie of the rev share. And then men's basketball is going to be the second thing. And then really it's up to like that third decision. So where is that third piece of pie going at certain schools? If it's going towards women's basketball, you're going to be pretty competitive. You're going to be a South Carolina, a UConn, and LSU. If it's going towards something else and you're not going to put any money towards women's basketball, or you're not going to commit to putting any more money towards women's basketball, then I think you're going to have a hard time like making NCAA tournaments, being consistently competitive. I think that's why Wisconsin had such a hard time, frankly, making a hire, because, the word is like they weren't willing to commit any rev share dollars towards women's basketball. I'm like, listen, like no women's basketball coach in their right mind is asking for, hey, we should get the same as football and men's basketball. But they just want a little bit. They want a little piece of the pie to work with when they go into the portal, and they can say to a player, hey, we can give you X if you come here, as opposed to, hey, we can't give you anything. So I think that's where we're going to see a little bit of disparity in terms of haves and have-nots. And yeah, it might lead to less upsets.
Going into the Sweet 16 this weekend, let's talk with the teams that are left and a little tournament talk, man. It feels – I'm looking at it like UConn now has a pretty clear path to get into the Final Four.
Absolutely.
Just kind of curious your thoughts on, are we going to see any upsets this round, or are you looking at any of the matchups and saying, I could see this team coming out of the region and kind of getting to the Final Four, and kind of how you feeling about the matchups we got right now?
So I would pencil in UConn to make the Final Four. I just think, and it's a real bummer, Juju
it really is.
Injury.
That's awful. Like,
yeah,
that would have been so much fun watching that matchup if she had played against Paige in the Elite Eight. But
absolutely,
what are you gonna do?
I think the selection committee, when they put that together, they were hoping for what we got last year with Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese, Iowa and LSU in the Elite Eight. They were trying to kind of recreate that with Juju and Paige, and it really would have been an incredible matchup. So that's a bummer. I don't really see any other team in that region beating UConn, so I would go ahead and pencil them into the Final Four. I think South Carolina is probably going to come out of this Birmingham too, though I don't think South Carolina is like the monster that they have been in years past. Like they don't have that dominant post player that Aaliyah Boston, Camila Cardozo, even the player that really was supposed to kind of be the best in the post for them this year, Ashlyn Watkins. She's hurt, so I think they are beatable. I mean, UCLA and UConn and Texas all beat South Carolina in the regular season. I'm just not sure there's any teams here in Birmingham that can do it. I do think Duke probably has the best chance. They have, I think, the best defense. I think they have a chance to maybe put the clamps on South Carolina and make some things difficult for them. But I ultimately think South Carolina will probably come out of this. The other two are really interesting. I think that NC State has a chance to – LSU versus NC State, I think, is going to be the Sweet 16 matchup. I think that's who's going to come out of that region. I think both of those teams have a really good chance to beat UCLA. UCLA is really talented. They have Lauren Betts, 6'7" center, Big Ten Defensive Player of the Year, first team All-American. I'm just like, I've talked about this a couple of times on my podcast I do with Mia O'Brien. I just don't think UCLA has that dog in them. I just don't 100% believe in them. I think LSU
They've looked pretty good all year.
Yeah.
But they haven't I guess that's fair. They haven't necessarily been tested all that much either to kind of show that.
Yeah. So, I think that's a region that I would keep my eyes on for an upset, like LSU or NC State making a run to the Final Four as a 3 or a 2. And then this other Birmingham site, that one to me is kind of wide open. Like Texas is probably the weakest of the number one seeds. You have Notre Dame here, who was the number one team in the country before they kind of stumbled at the end of the regular season. TCU is here with Haley Van Lith and Sidonia Prince. They're really playing well. And then you got Tennessee under a first-time head coach and Kim Caldwell. They're the highest scoring offense in the country. They play at a really fast pace. I wouldn't be surprised to see them upset Texas in the Sweet 16. And then who knows when we get to the Elite Eight. I would probably pick Notre Dame to come out of this region.
So of those four, then it sounds like you would – the way that you sound most encouraged, I guess, by UConn getting there. Do you think they're the best four teams left, or who do you think's raising the trophy here in a couple of weeks?
I think your Final Four is probably NC State, UConn, South Carolina, Notre Dame. I think we're probably going to see a UConn Notre Dame national title.
Boy, that'd be an amazing national title game. That'd be awesome.
Yeah. And I sort of just believe in Paige Beckers this year. Like, seems like she has a chip on her shoulder. Seems like she wants to get it done. I mean, if she doesn't win one, she would be like the best player in UConn history to not win a national title. And if you're her, that's probably not really a club you want to be a part of.
I don't know if that's a great title to have, but
you want to go out with a ring. So, I just kind of believe in UConn this year. I sort of think if anything good can happen for UConn's women's basketball, it usually does. And now all of a sudden they have an easier path to the Final Four. And I like their chances in Tampa once they get there.
Well, I can't wait to see how these next few weeks. We got some great hoops kind of coming up here on both the men's and women's side. Mitch, I really appreciate you taking some time and chatting with us. And everybody that is a women's hoops fan, definitely try and follow this man on Twitter, Primetime Mitch. He's going to be breaking news always and kind of keeping you up to date on everything that's going on. So it's a great follow and well worth the time.
Appreciate it. Thanks, man.